Welcome back to the Blazor Server in-depth course. In this lesson, we're going to wrap up this section by going over our homework and reviewing what we've learned. So hopefully you've concluded your homework by now. Now it's time for us to go over it together. So let's review what the homework was. The homework is to create a Blazor site with the following: a copyright notice in the default layout footer, a secondary layout for new pages that identifies them as experimental, and working voting buttons on the experimental layout page. All right, so there's three different things we have to do, mostly focused around the layout pages, although we'll have to create new pages and we'll also have to work with some C# code. So let's get started. We'll create a new project, Blazor app, and we'll call this the section 04 homework. And we'll make sure it's .NET Core 3.1, Blazor Server app, HTTPS is checked. Hit create. And now what we're going to do is we're going to first modify the main layout page. And this main layout page needs a footer. So we'll put this footer at the very bottom. And I'm going to center the text. So I'm going to say class equals text center. And then in here, I'll say copyright 2020 by Timco Enterprises. Now I could make that a, let's do that. Let's say at datetime.now.year. That should work. So let's make sure that part works. We have a centered footer that says copyright 2020 by Timco Enterprise. All right. And nope, it's over here. That's hideously ugly. But it's there. It's just not where you want it to be. Let's find out why that is. So we've got the sidebar and then main and then footer. But for some reason, main is kind of crunching us out, it looks like. Let's hit F12, and we're going to figure out why is it that, let's look at this section 1 up. Main, if we, let's see if we can't scroll us down. Looks like mains take up the entire page, and that's why. So what we'll do is we'll figure out a way to get below it a different way. All right. So what we're going to do is, I think I'll wrap this in a div. Let's see if that'll work. Let's do this. Let's wrap this whole thing in a div. Actually, no, let's make a change here. Let's move the footer inside of main. I don't want to fight with this and try and break what main is doing. Main is taking up the rest of the space, essentially. And if I fight with that, I might have some other issues. And instead of messing with CSS and causing problems, I'll put footer right inside main, but it's still the main section. Let's try that and see if that works. And if not, we can tweak some more. But I think this should work. All right, so there's our main. It puts it right below the last of the page. So wherever it is, that's where it's at. I think that works. We could work on a sticky footer or something else and bring in some CSS to make it work right, or even better. But I think that works well for the web, because the web has this concept of no real bottom on your page. Your page bottom is wherever the last of your text goes to. So I think that works just fine, especially if we were to crunch this up and have a scroll of some kind. Notice it is at the bottom when you scroll. So I think this is fine. So now we have on every page, because it's default layout, we have that copyright 2020 by Timco Enterprises. So that's the first part of our homework, is to put that footer on our default layout. Now let's create another layout. And in fact, just so you can make sure you see it and understand what it is, I'm going to call it secondary layout, since that's what it asked for in the instructions. So in the secondary layout, what I'm going to do is take the main layout. I'm going to copy this. So now it's the same layout as the main layout. It's just called secondary. But we're going to do some tweaks to it. We're going to identify this as experimental. All right, I'm going to take out this about right here. I don't think we need to have that on this page. And instead, I'm going to say span, and I'm going to say experimental page. Something like that. Works fine. But this pulls to the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a class equals flex fill. And what that will do is it will fill up the remaining space in this flex box so that it will pull this to the left. So that's what I'm going to do so that now this can say experimental version. Let's change the color as well. Let's say that the BG is, danger, I think is probably a good idea. And that means the text on this should be white. That probably will work better. So now let's try this out with a new page. So we'll create a new page. So a new item, razor component, and let's just call this the testing page. And we'll say that the at layout first is going to be secondary layout, and at page is going to be testing. Okay, and we will add some navigation for this. So let's create a link for this, and we'll say that this is testing. We'll call this testing, and let's see if there's a entry here for, there's not one for that. There's not one for experimental. One for beaker. I think that works well. Okay, let's see how this works. So now we have a secondary page where it says experimental page at the top, and this is our testing page. It still has the copyright at the bottom. That's cool. But that really indicates this is an experimental page versus a regular page. All right, we could even copy like the weather forecast or something like that and put it on there, but now it's experimental. All right, so that works just fine. Now let's look at adding voting buttons to our layout, which we didn't really do specifically, but this is a page like anything else. So what I'm going to do is I'll put the code here for now, and we'll see if we want to move it somewhere else in a minute. But private int approvals equals 0, and private int disapprovals equals 0. And then we'll have a private void thumbs up, which is going to say approvals plus equal 1. And we'll have another method. So private void thumbs down. That's going to say disapprovals plus equal 1. All right, so that's approvals and disapprovals. So that's going to be our two methods and our two values we can pull from. And now we're going to put right in this experimental page line, I'm going to create a button. We're going to say this button has a class of btn, btn dash, let's do btn dash primary. Let's go do primary for both of them. I could do, there is the success and danger, but I'm already at that red line. I don't want to have more red there because success would be green and danger would be red by default. So that'd be kind of a approval and disapproval, but primary allows me to have a different color than that red bar. So I think primary is getting good. And we're also going to have a margin in the x-axis of 2. So notice I'm not doing any CSS. So if you find yourself doing CSS, take a step back and look to see if Bootstrap has something to help you. It probably does. Margins, paddings, all around, different sizes. Then they're all uniform, and you don't have to mess with custom styling. So in this case, we have a margin of, in the x-axis, so the left and right, is going to have a margin of 2, the second value, which I believe 2 is like 0.5 EM or something like that. Not quite sure. It's 0.5 something, I forget. But I think it'll work for us. And we're also going to have an on click event that's going to be thumbs up. All right, there's our button. And then in this button, we're going to have a span. And this is going to be one of those icon buttons. So class equals OI, and then OI dash, there's a thumbs up and thumbs down, or thumb up and thumb down. So that's really convenient. And we're going to say approvals. And let's actually put in here how many approvals have been given for this page. It'll do the exact same thing over again, but this time for disapprovals. Thumbs down, and this will be down as well. And this is going to be disapprovals. Okay, so now let's run this again. We've created 2 buttons in here, and we've wired them up to 2 methods that are supported by 2 variables. So now we have approvals and disapprovals on this page. We can click the approval and it changes the number, and same with disapprovals. So now we have an experimental page with some feedback we can give the developers from the user saying, hey, I approve this, or no, I really don't approve this. Now, obviously, this is just a testing thing. We wouldn't give this specifically because I can click this more times than you can click that one, so therefore mine wins for some reason. You'd want to have this locked to 1 per user, and it's saved to a database and all the rest. But I think that you get the point that we can put some code here, and now we can have some information about this page. One thing to note, that if we had more than 1 page that was experimental, if we went between them directly, then this approval information would stay even across those pages. So be careful of that. But if you go off to a different page that does not use that layout and come back, it's going to wipe out your values. So just note that's what's going to happen is when you change to a different layout page. Otherwise, it will keep the same values. So you would want to store them on this layout page. You'd want to be careful how you did that. But just note that this is a possibility of changing a layout page and maybe putting a little bit of interactivity with it, whatever that may be. All right, so I believe that's all your homework. We've gone over how to create that copyright notice for the footer, for the default page. We added a secondary layout for new pages. We created a new page and put its navigation in there. And we designate it as experimental page. And then we also put the voting buttons on that experimental layout page or the secondary layout so that whenever you go to an experimental page, we can vote on that page. All right, so that's it for your homework. Hopefully you've kind of grasped all the concepts that we went over in this section. Make sure you practice what you learn though. Practice is very, very important to making sure you get this firmly in your brain. In the next section, we're going to go further down the rabbit hole by looking at components, which, as a little bit of a hint, are actually just pages. We can take a page and make it into a piece of a page somewhere else. So we're going to do that in the next section. So get ready for that and come on back when you're ready.